Hello, what I imagine are Slipknot fans and probably Slipknot mask collectors. My name is Andrew Smith. I'm just recording this audio on my cell phone. I thought it would maybe be interesting to you all to kind of learn a little bit, or at least from my perspective, a little bit about early Slipknot mask replicas and kind of the early scene from, like, you know, from self-titled up. That's really when I came into it. I became a fan of Slipknot shortly after self-titled was released and was one into the Iowa era. I really never got into anything after that. But I could still put those first two albums on, actually, and Make Feed Kill Repeat, and jam out to them. But otherwise, I don't really listen to anything else. But so anyway, so I came into it probably around 2000 or 2001 ish, and so I'm gonna flash pictures up of the few things that I have. Unfortunately, most of my old pictures are gone. Almost all the old pictures that I took to show off and display stuff that I made and to sell stuff that I made, I took on an old Sony camera that recorded pictures to an actual 3.5-inch floppy disk. If any of you all even remember what those are, like, you'd actually put that in the camera. And if you all have ever used floppy disks, you know how easily the information becomes corrupted, and that's where I stored all of them. You got to remember, this was back the age of floppy disks and dial-up internet, so it sucked, and I was a kid, so I didn't preserve things well. Oh, let me back up a little bit. My name is Andrew Smith, and I started making Slipknot masks and selling them. I was probably 13 or 14 when I started, and probably 14. And all the different mask companies had like a name and stuff. So I was a dumb kid, and instead of thinking that I could just sell them as Andrew Smith because I was just a kid in a basement, I called myself AWS Studio to make it sound official and cool, even though it was not official and I was not cool. But anyway, if you've looked into old mask collecting or you've been a mask collector for a long time, that may ring a bell. Later, I kind of stopped making Slipknot-related stuff, and I'll get into that in a little bit, and moved strictly into horror stuff. And then about as quickly as I did that, I kind of stopped altogether because by 2004 or 5, I was up to my neck in college work. I was going to college, and I was studying art, and I just didn't have time to fool with it. And actually, by this time too, I'd fallen completely out of love with masks, mainly because I was a huge collector of masks in general, not just Slipknot, and mostly independently made masks. But anyway, my whole collection, or my whole room rather, whenever I was a kid, or whenever I was in high school and starting college, every single spot on the wall that could be a shelf was a shelf, and there was a mask on it. And one day, I can't remember which mask it was, but one of my beloved masks, which they all were, I noticed was rotting. And at that time, I think I'd already stopped buying masks anyway, because I had so many, and didn't have any money, so it kind of, because I'd stopped selling masks, and when I'd sold masks, I would turn around and use that money to buy masks. So since I didn't have money coming in from selling masks, I didn't buy new masks, and the whole thing kind of seemed futile. So, like, I saw one of my masks start dry rotting, so that was kind of the last straw that broke the camel's back, and decided I didn't want to have a bunch of money invested in a medium that eventually would dry rot. I know that people say with the right care and the right climate, they can last a long time, but a long time still isn't forever. and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to store them properly to keep them alive. So I actually like sold almost everything that I had immediately on eBay, and probably sold everything at like a loss. But anyway, what I wanted to talk about is I wanted to talk about what I did as a mask maker. So that way, if you all see old pieces, which to be honest, there probably aren't going to be very many because I didn't produce a lot. And as I mentioned, latex doesn't last a long time, and I was probably selling to mostly other kids. So, people that probably weren't taking great care of them anyway. But anyway, like I said, I got bitten by the bug my 8th grade year of middle school and my freshman year of high school. In art class, in both those years, we made masks out of plaster Paris cloth. And I made one in middle school and liked it. In my freshman year, I made one that looked like, as best as I could approximate, a Jim Root Jester mask from Self-Titled. I even put his frosted spiky hair on it, and I have no idea where I'm sure that's in the garbage somewhere in the landfill. But anyway, I made that, and I liked it so much that I really wanted to get into mask making. So I started looking online for tutorials, and the first thing I found was a tutorial for a masking tape mask. I don't know if that's something anybody ever fools with anymore, but the way the instructions were, and I made probably 5 or 6 masks like this. You put a pantyhose over your head, have somebody wrap your head in masking tape, and then cut a slit up the back till as far as it needs to be to get it off your head. So I did that, and I made a Corey mask like that, and I made several. I tried to make a version of a clown mask. I'm assuming it would have been a self-titled attempt, but I'm sure it was also terrible. And I made a Chris Fenn mask like that too. That was actually really cool for being made out of masking tape. Again, I have no pictures, which sucks. And then I started looking into how to actually make a Halloween mask and a latex mask. So I found, I believe it was Monster Makers, where they had their kit. And at that time, I don't know what it is now, but at that time it was $300. And I just so happened to have a savings account that had roughly that much money in it. And so like I begged my dad to let me pull that money out and to buy this kit as an investment in my artistic future, which I guess in the long run, it really was. As I learned a lot from doing that and from selling and all the things that it provided, I learned a lot. But anyway, the first thing that I sculpted and molded was a Paul, Iowa mask. And then I think the second thing that I sculpted was a Paul self-titled pig mask. And this was actually before most, at least as far as I know, most Slipknot mask collectors knew that you could just go buy that mask from the person that and the company that originally made it. At that time, information was kind of hard to come by, and as far as any of us knew, they were just custom made, things, or something that were such an old relic that you just couldn't get. So, there wasn't a lot of information at that time, and we just sort of flew by the seat of our pants. Plus, it was all a bunch of kids for the most part. My recollection is that there were only a few adults actually involved in mask making. Slipknot mask making anyway. And then, so the next thing that I sculpted and cast after that, if I'm not mistaken, was my attempt at a self-titled clown, which I'll actually have pictures up here because one of these I know still exists because my friend Brandon owns it. And actually, I have the plans eventually because people have shown some interest in recasting this and selling blanks, as I have no interest in painting masks because that was such a pain in the butt. I might talk about that a little bit more later. So that was the clown. mask. And by the way, every single one of these I did was rushed. I really, in hindsight, I wish I would have taken more time to detail them a little bit better and just overall form a little bit better. Well, there's a lot of things I regret with mask making. I'll get back to that too. And then the next thing that I sculpted, I believe, was a Corey, Iowa, and it was terrible. As a matter of fact, I think I only ever ended up making one copy of that. Oh, and to go back to the other ones, my first Paul mask, the Iowa one, I think I only ever made 4 or 5 of those in a couple different versions. The pig mask, I think I only ever made 4 or 5 of those. I see that a couple of those still exist in private collections, but not very many. And for the self-titled clown, I think I made maybe 3 or 4 that was an actual attempt to have it look like the way Sean's mask looks. And then I did a couple custom paint ups that I have no idea what I ended up doing. I mean, I sold them or gave them away or something, but I don't know where they are. One was white with like a black beard section and like yellow above the eyes. And let's see, the next thing I did after that was a Iowa clown, and that was my first attempt. All the other ones before were all water-based clay, and my Iowa clown was my first attempt at Rama clay, which I really liked. I liked that it really held its shape real well, and it could just set on an armature, and I didn't feel like it was going to dry out. But at the same time, what I had was a little bit too firm. And I know 1 or 2 of those are still kicking around. Let's see, what's the next? I sculpted my own version. Actually, this probably would have been before the Iowa clown. I sculpted my version of a Chris Fenn liar mask post-conversion. So I sculpted as best I could how the liar mask looks after a conversion, so that way I didn't have to convert any liars. So I just, pulled them and painted them and stitched them and strapped them. And speaking of straps, there weren't a lot of people at the time that did strapping well. And even in hindsight and looking back at how people strap things now, things are strapped far more accurately now than they were then. But that was a thing that I got commissioned to do a lot, was people would send me their things to be strapped. They would be done, but I would strap them. And I probably did that maybe 15 or 20 times for people. At one time, I actually had on loan an actual Ghost Glow mask that I casted, that I had a mold of for a little while, and I made several of those. And like I said too, at that time, in the early, like 2001, 2002, maybe 2003, we were trying, me, and it was like literally like 3 or 4 other guys that I talked to. And I talked to when it came to Slipknot stuff, it was almost all exclusively done over AOL Instant Messenger. I don't even think I did anything Slipknot related on forums. That's how long ago it was, because forums weren't that commonplace. But there was a dude, I don't really want to mention anybody by name, and to be honest, I'll probably actually forget some of them, but it was a dude that I was friends with that lived in California that I would talk to a lot, that was like a year younger than me, and he and I would like sleuth and try to figure out what things were. And I can remember when he and I figured out that you could just buy Paul pig masks. We figured out who the company was that made the respirator for Craig's first mask, and I remember we even called the company to see if we could buy them, but at this point it was a couple years out of production and they didn't have them. Of course, at that time, whenever I first started making masks, you could buy the gesture masks to make Jim's mask very easily, and I had bought and converted many, and in hindsight I really wish that I would have recasted a whole gesture mask just for posterity. But you know, when you're young, you don't think about planning ahead that well. But I did a lot of those actually. I did end up buying and casting the face of a jester, like just the amount that you need to actually make a gym mask. And I did a lot of those paint-ups and conversions. Sold a lot of those. I probably did those and liars the most, now that I think about it. And I can remember when I came up with the way to install Dreds and a Corey mask, and that was by starting with a really thin cotton rope and sort of flaring out the ends so that it made like a disc shape, like if you'd press it down against the table. And since hot glue wouldn't stick to latex, what I'd do is pump hot glue onto latex like a piece, shove that rope into it flat, and then pump some more over top and like get my fingers wet and smush it down to where it made like a soft disc. And then I would dread, wrap the dread and whatever I was using at the time. I think I mostly used jute twine, and after I would make them up, I would dye them. Actually, I think I usually made them up and then put the ends on, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong, because all of us were trying to figure out a way to hook the dreads in where they wouldn't come out and where they weren't jabbing your head. So that's what I came up with, and I can't remember if I shared that with anybody or not. So if that's common practice today, either it very well may be that I came up with that, or that other people just came up with it at the same time. I know that stuff's pretty common, so I don't really want to just take credit. Oh, okay, I think you guys might find this interesting. So when I first started selling, like I said, it was either through AOL Instant Messenger or it was through eBay. Well, once the band realized, the band or their management or whoever, I don't want to blame the band, because I know I actually had the opportunity to talk to Sid Wilson during the Iowa era over the phone, and he actually thought it was really cool that I made masks and that people made masks and collected them and that sort of thing. So I'd say the band was completely behind people making their own and probably even selling them, but because of licensing, because they started making their own licensed masks, which, as you all probably know, they suck. All my auctions would get pulled off eBay. So a culmination of several things: my auctions being pulled off eBay, not really having another good outlet to sell them, and also having a new batch of, for lack of a better word, kids join the hobby, where at this time I was probably like a 17 or 18-year-old, and I have like 13-year-olds messaging me and wanting to buy Corys for like $30. That was where I was at. It seemed like at that time, serious collectors had kind of lost interest, and the only other collectors I was talking to were more or less kids that didn't want to pay what it cost to make a handmade mask. And that culminating with, or that combined rather, with eBay pulling auctions, I just had enough of it and I quit. And then shortly thereafter, I moved to just doing horror stuff. And as kind of a side note, if you guys are only interested in Slipknot stuff, you might forward a little bit. But I started making horror stuff, and my first horror thing that I did was a Texas Chainsaw Massacre mask from the original film of Leatherface. And at that time, as far as I know, it was actually the first one that was full head. Up till that point, I think most mask makers thought that was a face mask, and that the wig that Leatherface was wearing was just the guy's hair. Because you got to remember, at this time, the only thing we had were DVDs that weren't really digitally remastered, so they kind of looked like crap. So what you were going off of, reference-wise, wasn't very good. And information was hard to come by, but while going through frames of my DVD, I ended up figuring out that it was full head, so that's the way I sculpted mine. And as you know, when you don't have a great reference, you end up you have to fudge details and take artistic liberties, which I did. But it actually ended up being a rather popular piece. And I think when it's all said and done, I think I ended up selling about 15 of those. And it was called the KillNskin. KillNskin, and that ended up becoming my username handle for all the forums for a while. So I did those, and the way that I would do that is I'd make myself a personal copy. Somebody would order one, I would send them my personal copy. I would make myself another one. Somebody would order one, I would sell my personal copy. Because I liked having one so much. So that was one of my problems too, is I would get bored with something and just stop fooling with it. So that's why there's only a couple of everything that I've ever made, if that. I'm sure throughout this video I'll keep recalling masks that I made earlier in the timeline that I'll just tell you as I think of them. But I also made a Mick Mate Fee Kill Repeat mask. Again, I did not know that was a mass-produced mask that, funny enough, as far as I can tell, just looks like they were going for a knockoff of a Jason mask, which cracks me up. But anyway, just based off of pictures I could find of Mick, which are not very good, I did one that, actually looking at the real thing now, actually was pretty daggone close. Let's see. So anyway, I was doing horror stuff, and the next thing I made is I tried to sculpt a Michael Myers mask, and it was terrible. It was terrible. Like everybody's first stab at a H1, it's almost always pure hot garbage. So that was terrible. Oh, so this will be funny. I want to tell you about some fun and or crappy Slipknot mask related stories. So, as you all might know, the first person that I saw making Slipknot masks that seemed like they were a person that really knew what they're doing and that was a real mask maker, this was before I started really making them, was Jeremy Bohr. And I remember he made like several Slipknot masks, and they were really good, as far as I could tell, and especially compared to the reference materials you could get. I mean, they were good, and everybody wanted them. So at some point, I scraped up the needed like $75 to place an order for Jeremy's Iowa mask. And you got to keep in mind, I was probably like 13 at the time, and I was so annoying. I placed the order, and I probably called Jeremy every couple of days to ask him where he was on my mask. And finally, I doubt he remembers this, but finally he was so annoyed with me calling, because he could remember me, that he canceled my order. He canceled my order and returned my money. And I was so disappointed. But that's when I learned, when you're having somebody do something for you and you want them to do it, you start them doing it and then you leave them alone. So I learned a valuable lesson there, and I always felt bad about bothering him. And at the time, I had actually no idea that I was bothering him. Jeremy, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry. Actually, I think we're Facebook friends. Another thing, too, is, like I said, trying to find original stuff when we first started out was really hard. And an original West German clown mask actually came up on eBay. This probably would have been in 2000. It would have been roughly around while Slipknot was touring, probably still for Iowa, if I'm not, yeah, it would have been before Subliminal Verses. So it was while they were still touring for Iowa, or roughly thereabouts. And it came up for sale, and it was a buy it now for $40. A buy it now for $40. And I jumped on it. I was so excited. And I'd been wanting one of these for years at this point. And like an idiot, whenever I made my payment to the seller, in the comment to the seller, I mentioned how excited I was to be able to get this mask, and that I've been looking for it forever. And they wrote me back and asked me, what the big deal was. And again, being very naive, I told them. So then they probably did a little bit of research on their own. And then the guy emails me and says, "I'm sorry, I'll have to refund your money. The mask, before I could get it packaged, was chewed up by my dog." And he sent me a picture of what was obviously a mask with the face just smushed in. It was not tore up at all. And I was so pissed off. But, as a kid, as far as I knew, I had no recourse. So then, under another account, within the next week, which bear in mind, I looked at eBay every day for years. So, like, within a week later, another auction showed up with pictures of what had to be the exact same mask, but it was different pictures and it was under a different seller name. But it was listed as a Slipknot mask. That mask ended up selling for over $1,000. And then a mask that looked exactly the same, with the same wear and the same damaged, appeared to be being worn by Sean at a live concert not too long after. And me and the friends that I talked to about this were just 100% convinced that Sean was the one that bought that mask after it was relisted. And I would say that's probably true. I hated losing it, but at the same time, I guess I'm glad Sean got it. I guess I'd have rather paid $40 and just given it to Sean, though, rather than him paying $1,000 for it. Let's see, what else? I never got my hands on another original Ghost Glow. I did have an original crash test dummy that I converted, I thought, beautifully. And a friend of mine was actually going to a Slipknot show, and he asked me if I wanted to send him something to get autographed. So I pulled the Dreds out of that and sent it to him to get autographed for me. And he did and sent it back to me. And it was like a prized piece of mine for a long time. But when I decided to get out of mask collecting, I went to sell it. And for some reason, I guess my outlets for selling it were limited. And a friend of mine offered to buy it, and he offered me, I think, like $75, and that was all the prospects I had at the time. So I sold it to him. So if somebody out there has a probably dry rotted crash test dummy mask that was signed by Corey, like on the side of the face, like cheek area, that's probably the one that I had signed. And that would have been in like 2002, 2003 maybe. Oh, okay. Since we're talking about regrets. So, as you all know from what I said earlier, I did all this mask making in the basement of my parents' house. And that's where all my stuff was. All my supplies, all my molds. At this point, I had to have accumulated or made anywhere between like 15 and 25 molds. I can't remember at this point. I mean, I could barely remember everything I sculpted and molded. But they decided they were going to move. And at this time, I was up to my neck in college. I was only there for maybe 2 years. And so I had a couple more to go. I had no place to store. They had no place to store stuff. And because I thought I was just done with masks and thought nobody would ever care about anything mask related that I did ever again, including myself, which was not, I really wish I had everything right now. So what I decided to do was, we had a gravel driveway, and to like fill some of the potholes, I just took all my molds out and would throw my mold into the pothole. And since I was diligent with my burlap when I made my molds, I would usually have to come back with a sledge and bust them, a sledgehammer. So every single one of my molds that I ever made or ever acquired through any transactions or anything were busted. So the few pictures that I have from the old days and a few pictures that I have from masks that are still kicking around is all that I have as far as evidence of me ever doing this stuff and this video that I'm making right now, because it struck me that I can make this video for free and put it on YouTube, and that 4 or 5 people that collect masks might find it interesting, because as far as I can tell, it seems like most people started collecting Slipknot masks seriously, like as far as a lot of people doing it, like a long time after I stopped making them. And by that I mean probably 4 or 5 years. Maybe not though. But so I feel like there's a gap in the history of Slipknot mask collecting and people involved with it that people might not know anything about. Stuff that happened between 2001 and 2004. But like I said, Jeremy Bohr made a lot of stuff that was really cool. That's another thing I wanted to mention, is the other people that made stuff that was cool. And I probably won't remember them all. right now. And like I said, I had a couple buddies that did stuff like on the side, like I did. There was a dude that I knew, which I'd actually like to get in contact with this guy. So if anybody knows him, send him this video, and I like just tell him hi. But there was a dude, I want to say that he lived in Canada or Detroit, in that area. I think his name was Dave. And he was the guy who I first saw do an actual conversion on a lyre mask. And they were really cool. And I think I owned 2 or 3 of his pieces at one time. And there was another dude that you guys probably know of. It was No Face and Baba Paint. He made a lot of real cool stuff. At the time, he was really the person that made the good stuff. And I think he did a couple cracks at the Iowa Clown, and his last attempt was awesome. I just remember being floored by it. And his Corey Iowa mask was like the gold standard forever. I mean, it was so good. Like, he came out with his while I was like sculpting mine. And when I saw his, like, I was just like I don't even, in hindsight, I don't even know why I bothered to mold my Corey sculpture, because in comparison, I mean, his was a masterpiece to my pile of dog crap. Who else was doing stuff? There was, I want to say it was like an Alex Art, something. It was a mask maker who made, I know at least, Iowa Clown. That was pretty cool. I never owned it. I didn't like it as much as No Faces, but it was cool. Oh, I also did an Iowa Gym at one time too. But I never really liked it very much, like the Iowa Gym in general. I liked mine. It was actually a pretty decent replica, but I only made a handful of those. There was one guy that was based in another country that I can't recall. I want to say maybe England, who I think did his own version of the pig. If you all are avid mask collectors, you probably know about, and I can't remember his name or what he went by online, but there was a Japanese collector that like bought one of everything at the time from everybody that made stuff, and he bought a lot of stuff from me. So his collection, as a matter of fact, as I've gone through this video and probably now, some of the pictures that I put up that I have of stuff I made is probably from his old website. Or I might just cut out all the horror mask talk and just keep it Slipknot related. I don't know. Maybe I'll do a director's cut. I went to college. I studied art. I got a 4-year degree in studio art where I concentrated in painting and sculpture. I currently now run the Flatwoods Monster Museum in Sutton, West Virginia. So if you're into like cryptids or alien stuff and you want to check it out sometime, what little bit of art that I still do, I usually actually do for my work by I design t-shirts that we sell, and I design a lot of brochures and rack cards for my area, which is the Braxton County area of West Virginia. So if you ever see something that's based in Braxton County and looks decent, there's a good chance that I probably designed it. For more information on the museum and the Flatwoods Monster in general, go to braxtonwv.org/monster. So if you're into that kind of stuff, it was briefly, as far as I can tell, it was an alien encounter that took place on September 12th, 1952 in Flatwoods, West Virginia. At that time, stories like that were very, very uncommon, and it actually made national news. And since then, it's been, it's kind of come and gone in pop culture. There's a big following in Japanese UFO lore, and is actually just featured in Fallout 76, the new video game. And the story is going to be featured in a upcoming series on the History Channel that's going to air in January 2019 called Project Blue Book. So if that's something you might be interested in, it seems to have a similar feel to History Channel's 3-part series, The Hatfield and McCoys. So if you dug that, you might dig this. So go check that out. But anyway, I mostly just live here. I've got a wife. I've got 2 great kids. Like I said, I do a lot of art stuff on the side. Very little mask stuff. I'll put some pictures up here in this section of some mask-related things that I've done in the last little bit, but they've all just been personal. I really have no interest whatsoever in selling stuff. As I find original pieces of mine from back in the day, if people are interested and I find the time and I keep myself motivated to fool with it, I do plan on like recasting my personal stuff that I created and possibly selling blanks. So, keep an eye out for that if you have any interest. And if that stuff comes up, I might do more videos, on this channel talking about it. So if you're interested, and it's been a little while since this was created, maybe check out the other stuff on my channel. It's probably going to mostly be videos of like my kids or like my dog. It's not going to be mask related at all, probably. But, if it is, that's where it'll be. Anyway, I hope you all found this interesting. And if you have any additional questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try to get to them. Actually, the thing that's gotten me most into thinking about mask collecting again, and Slipknot masks in particular, is some of my old friends from back in the day have found me on Facebook and sent me friend requests, and evidently old fans that I didn't know I had have contacted me through there. There's only like 3 of them, so I follow a lot of stuff on Facebook that's mask related just to see it, because I found the thing that I like about masks a lot is seeing them, not necessarily owning them. So I live vicariously through a lot of people. I watch a lot of I probably watch like every AJ Good video that he puts out. He has awesome stuff and shows a lot of awesome stuff. Anywho, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.